Give a quick update to this body on a conversation that started yesterday and has been ongoing for months about Russia and their interference in our elections, how they're trying to engage with us in a way that much of Europe has seen for decades. We just haven't seen in the United States. Yesterday, Senator Burr and Senator Warner stood up and gave an update of where we are in the status of the investigation from the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. They walked through some of the statistics. We've done over 100 interviews. We've got 4,000 pages of transcript from those interviews. We have 100,000 documents that we've gone through so far, and there's more to go. We've completed some areas where we've interviewed everyone that we could possibly interview in that area, and in other areas, as we do one interview, they quote a couple other people, we go chase down those individuals, and it continues to lead. So parts of it are not done at this point, but some of it is. Several aspects are clear from the investigation, though again, it's not complete, and we will have a final document at the end. Some of the areas that are clear are that Russia was trying to use active measures to engage us in our last election. That part is very, very clear. Now, the question comes from many people, why would they do that? Well, quite frankly, this is the way Russia's worked for a very long time. This asymmetric warfare that they do, where they try to constantly interfere in other people's thoughts and conflicts. They've done it across Europe for a long time. They're now doing it here. Some of this is a product of Russia having a very weak economy and trying to find some way to be able to bolster themselves up. In the last 2 years, the Russian ruble has dropped 40% in value. As they struggle with low oil prices, as they struggle in the way that they function their government with the oligarchs and a select group of people that can succeed and other folks continue to struggle around the country, as they struggle under that system where they have fake elections and such, they try to reach out to other countries and to try to interfere in ours to make us look like them. Well, we have a free press that they try to engage in. We have free speech that they don't have in Russia. We have freedom of religion, which they don't have in Russia. We have the ability to be able to have disputes on political issues. They clearly don't have that in Russia. If you disagree with leadership in Russia, you'll end up in prison. If you disagree with leadership in the United States, you'll end up on TV. It's very different to be in an open society like ours. But they reach in what we consider a strength and try to be able to make it our weakness. So we're going to try to get the facts out on this. And over the next several months, as we work through this process, try to expose what Russia is really trying to do. Now, they use some overt propaganda methods like Sputnik Radio and RT, as it's on multiple cable channels and satellite channels all around the United States. They're Russian propaganda. They're their version of the facts, and they're designed to create discord in our nation. That's what they do. There's also ways that are not quite as overt. They reach in on social media platform. They have their trolls in Russia that have thousands of fake accounts on Facebook and Twitter and other social media apps. And they use those thousands of apps to go search around any news in America and find a place where there's conflict in America and then try to amp up the volume. Now, to be clear, the Russians are not creating conflict in America. We have plenty of it. We disagree on issues. Again, it's our free society. When we disagree on something, we disagree on it publicly and sometimes loud. That's who we are as Americans. We try to work things out, sometimes at a high volume. But just like two kids that are fighting on the playground in the 5th grade, remember those two kids that started to fight and their friends were watching them? And then eventually someone on the other side of the playground started yelling, "Fight," and the crowd started forming? The Russians aren't starting the fight. They're not even in the fight. They're the kids on the far side of the playground trying to get more people to run to the fight. They're not starting the Twitter wars and the battles, but they look where America's divided. Issues like race, where those troll farms will try to find areas where we disagree on areas of race and reach in and try to amplify the volume on that by repeating accusations, by trying to be even more hostile online, to try to stoke disunity in our nation. It's important that we see that not every time you see something with a high number of hashtag counts that goes up, it's not always Americans that are pushing that up. Occasionally it's an outside body trying to raise the volume and make a conflict look even bigger than it already is in America, because they're into sowing discord. That's what they love to do. It's what the rest of the nations have seen them do, and it's what we should be very clear, that the Russians are trying to continue to sow chaos into us. They have reached into our election systems. In the previous couple of weeks, the FBI notified 21 different states that during the last election season, the Russians tried to interfere in their election process as a state. Now, that doesn't mean they did interfere. That means they reached in and tested systems. That means they tried to go into voter databases and see if they could access a voter database to see who was registered to vote. That means they tried to get into a Secretary of State's office in a local state to see if they could figure out how they do elections. That means they tried to reach into systems in states to see what voting machines that they use and if they try to connect them in. They were trying to find out how we do elections and to learn as much as they could about that process and to see how far they could get. Now, through all of our work, we've yet to find a single vote that was changed. The Russians didn't get into voting machines. They didn't alter the election in any way, but they were constantly probing through multiple states to see what they could get access to. Now, it's my belief that they're preparing for something else. They're trying to see what they could get access to in the last election to see if they could get back into it and do even more for the next election. We should be aware of that. We should be aware not only of their propaganda, but we should be aware that they are after our elections to try to see if they can find a way to, at the end of the election, to make us doubt the outcomes. So what can we do about that? Well, I would give you several ideas. One of them I would say is we need to protect the primacy of states running election. There's absolutely no need for the federal government to go to states and take over their election process. It's a constitutional protection that those states have to be able to run their elections, but every state is also responsible to do it. Of the 21 states that I noted, I did say to everyone here, the Russians tried to engage in 21 states. They couldn't get to a single voting machine. The states are already doing a good job, but they need help. There's no reason the state of Oklahoma should have to work alone to be able to protect itself from the Russians trying to invade it in the cyber attack. They're going to need some allies to be able to come along with them. But the state should still be able to run the system. There should be more sharing, though, between the state and the federal government. There should be an opportunity for the federal government to be able to say to a state earlier than 10 months after the election that, hey, you're being hacked. For the FBI to notify states a couple of weeks ago that they were hacked in the 2016 elections is a little late. When it's occurring, we need to have that engagement between state IT folks and between federal IT folks to be able to have that conversation as it's ongoing so the state can take protective measures as it's occurring. So we need to have that cooperation between states and the federal government. We need to be able to help states come up with a way that they can audit their system after the election is over. Every election, when it occurs, you should be able to audit it and make sure the machines that were actually running the election actually were not hacked. And you can verify that. In Oklahoma, we have optical scanners. You fill out a paper ballot, you run it through an optical scanner. At the end of the election time, they count everything from the optical scanner. If there's any question about the optical scanner, they can go back to paper, and they can actually do a hand count. We can literally audit our elections in that process. It's a safe system that we have set up in our state. Every state does it differently, but I would encourage every state to be able to set up a system where they can audit their system. Knowing this year, it was the Russians that were trying to engage in our election. It could be someone else that could do it. Any number of groups that could try to be able to interfere in our process. It's basic common sense to say that we should have a system of elections that you can actually audit. Perhaps Russia in the days ahead hopes that our nation will be more like theirs. We won't. We're the longest constitutional republic in the world. We still lead the world. We still put out our values about free speech, free press, freedom of religion, opportunities for individuals to actually engage and to have conflict with their own government and to be able to disagree publicly on things. We still can disagree with each other. But we need to be aware that they want to turn us to them. But I would hope for the sake of the Russian people, in the days ahead, they could be more like us. Ronald Reagan told a story about a friend of his that had a conversation with a Cuban refugee fleeing from the communism and oppression in Cuba in 1964. He said that his friend, this Cuban refugee, said, "If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth." We're still a role model for the rest of the world. And as much conflict as we have with each other, we're still a role model. I have no issue disagreeing at times with people on this floor. We can have our disagreements. But I don't want the Russians to interfere in our disagreements. They can keep their business over there. And in the days ahead, we'll continue to expose the things that they're doing so that in the days ahead, they can back off and go bug someone else because we're akin to what they're doing. With that, I yield the floor. I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.